Hello Year 10 and welcome to this video. This is the fourth topic that we're looking at and the fifth video that I've done on this. So this is just the language and dialogue section of Jekyll and Hyde revision. We've come so far. Look at how many sessions we've done on this. Check that you've got your notes up to date. Check that you've got two separate lessons on science and religion, secrecy and reputation. Check that you've got notes about structure and narrative, setting and symbolism. They should all be there on the frog page for you if you need to go back and repeat. So today then, let's look at language and dialogue. So all the language in the novel can be a little bit confusing, it's quite convoluted, but it's there for a reason, and I think we're going to get into some of those reasons today. Firstly then, the gentleman's dialogue reflects their anxieties in the novel. The gentlemanly characters in Jekyll and Hyde often hide their anxieties behind polite dialogue. Let's start with Utterson first, and some examples of this. He is very rational and formal most of the time. He's often keen to avoid discussing a scandal, so he uses vague phrases like tut tut rather than actually giving an opinion. Utterson can be forceful when he needs to be, such as when he pushes Jekyll for one word more about the clauses of his unusual will. His language can also be humorous. For example, in chapter 1, he says, "If he be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek," a really good quotation to learn for your exam. Well, let's move on to Jekyll. Jekyll's dialogue can be very guarded too. He's always trying to avoid questions, and he often chooses silence over speaking. For example, when Utterson asks him about his will, he shuts his mouth tight and nods his head. Rather than giving something away, he thinks if he says nothing at all, that's safer. When Hyde becomes more powerful than Jekyll, his formal guarded language breaks down. He has a feverish manner and he speaks in a changed voice and stutters, I have. So we come on to the jolly and theatrical Dr. Lanyon lastly. His dialogue is quite jokey, and he makes a joke about being one of Jekyll's oldest friends, and he chuckles. He also voices opinions and criticisms later on in the novel, accusing Jekyll of unscientific balderdash with a little spirit of temper. Later on, Lanyon's language becomes vague and also disturbed. That's what that word nebulous means. Nebulous, another word for vague. I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard. He resorts to cliches rather than clarity in his dialogue. He's so disturbed by what he's seen that he refuses to write it down as well. So Hyde's dialogue is uncivilized, just like him, and this is a key part of the novel that you need to learn to talk about and discuss in your essays. Hyde's speech is angry. When he first meets Utterson, he speaks with a flush of anger. Utterson scolds him for not using fitting language, and Utterson is alarmed by Hyde's open emotion. Hyde's dialogue is also less polite. His sentences are short and direct. What do you want? Have you got it? Using blunt questions, which Utterson finds quite rude because it's not how gentlemen are supposed to talk. Hyde is also associated with secrecy, as he uses a whispering and somewhat broken voice. He also is associated with inhuman voices too, like hissing and screaming in animal terror. This suggests that he is not fully human. So if you can learn these 4 different categories of speech related to Hyde, this will really help you, other than just saying that Hyde is disturbing. He speaks in a different way, and this gives away things about his character. So we move on to this formal narrative style, which is what the whole novella is written in. It can be quite off-putting. It's not really the way that we speak, but it's the way that these gentlemen speak to each other. And in particular, we see most of the action through Utterson's point of view. Now, Stevenson uses him as an author, as a narrator, for many reasons. The narrative is written in this formal, controlled language. So we've got a very ordered character, and he creates this very ordered narrative. And it reflects his personality. The plot details are also ordered in a very organised way, and we've got this organised character creating this very organised narrative. And just as a quick example of this, have a quick look at this small paragraph at the top of the screen. This is the section in the novel when Poole and Utterson break down Jekyll's door, the door to the cabinet, and they're just about to piece together a few more little pieces in this puzzle. And look at the way that the conjunctions combine with the prepositions to form this ordered narrative. He works through it methodically, and therefore the narrative is going to be methodical for us. The restrained language makes the content of the novel even more shocking in contrast. It makes the moments of violence stand out. For example, bashing down the red baize door. There's a sense of sudden noise and exclamations. The trampling of the poor girl is said in such a calm, composed, methodical way. It makes it stand out as shocking. And obviously the murder of the MP as well. So I want you to think about the combination of an ordered narrative with shocking content and how they are used as very effective contrasts in this novel. We've got a descriptive narrative style as well. It's not emotionless. It's very rich in descriptive language to paint a vivid picture and bring events alive for the reader. Firstly, let's have a look at the metaphors. There's just a couple here that you can pick out, and they're good quotations to learn for your exam, but I'm sure you can find many more as well. London is referred to as a drowned city, and the streets are arteries. Personification comes throughout this novella too. Jekyll's lab was thrust forward onto the pleasant street, and it's described as having a blind forehead. Making the building seem like a rude and secretive person, which represents Hyde, the person Jekyll has created in the lab. And lastly, we've got these similes. Hyde is constantly described using similes. He's like a madman, like a rat, and like Satan. Characters can only compare Hyde to other things. They can't accurately describe him, and this presents him as mysterious and threatening. Lastly, and to tie into that final point on similes, the characters really do struggle to describe Hyde. And I'm just going to give you a few examples from the book here, and again some really effective quotations to memorise because they work hard for you. They can represent the theme of secrecy, they can represent this topic here of language and dialogue, and you can talk about characters as well. The first character that can't describe him is Enfield. I can't describe him, and it's not want of memory, for I could declare I can see him this moment. He's not talking about literally being able to see him. His impression, the image of Hyde, has so made an impression, a negative impression on him, that he can see him in his mind now, but he doesn't have the language to be able to do this. This is a really interesting concept, that actually language can only take you so far, and sometimes what happens is we have these moments where we can't quite describe how we're feeling. Maybe thinking back to that poem There's a Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson. There's sometimes language doesn't quite do what we need it to do. Another character, Utterson, can't quite describe him. He dreams after he hears Enfield's story about this faceless figure, but then when he eventually does meet Hyde in chapter 2, he tries to kind of reflect on this character, and he says there is something more. If I could find a name for it. Again, a really good quote to learn. God bless me, the man seems hardly human, something troglodytic, shall we say. And it's this idea that we may have, like Victorians were starting to believe in this theory of evolution, we may have evolved, we may have developed to a point where we are civilized, where we can civilize everything. Everything has a rational, reasonable explanation. But there are certain things that mean it kind of surpasses understanding. It doesn't quite have a name for it. And finally, then, the last character that struggles to describe Hyde: something abnormal, misbegotten, something seizing, surprising and revolting. This is when he has the visit from Hyde at his door and he's about to transform into Jekyll. And you see there the repetition of that word something just reinforces the idea that language is not quite enough for these characters. They can't quite put into words what Hyde is. And I think if Stevenson did make him out to be this cat, if he described him in intense detail, his eyes were like this, his mouth was like this, when he spoke it sounded like this, I think if he did, perhaps it wouldn't quite be as terrifying, because every one of the readers that reads this novel has a different idea of what Hyde looks like in their head, and you construct these images based on your own version of what you think is horrific. So it's going to be different for every one of us. And I think Stevenson is very, very clever here to make it mysterious, to make language fail in order for you to fill in the gaps in your own mind. So it's very, very clever. So write about language and write about characters in your essays. It's a very important skill. The gentleman's language is very important, and stick in the bit about language of the other characters like Hyde, because this shows the examiner that you know the novel really well. Well, I hope that was useful. Just a short video today. Make sure your notes are up to date, and I'll see you for the final video tomorrow.